Today, I'm super excited to host a fireside chat focused on prioritization of the developer experience so we can accelerate the high-quality software development. As mentioned earlier in the keynote, if you had the chance to watch it, in today's modern economy, there's no organization that can grow and thrive without software and without developers. The developer is at the heart of everything. And at GitHub, we prioritize developers' happiness and developer experience. During today's session, we will be discussing how to increase developer productivity and happiness using GitHub Enterprise. Our amazing speakers will share their experience and their insight on how they accelerated software delivery and provided greater experience for their developers using GitHub. My name is Fatin Hiri. I'm the Corporate Field Service Manager for GitHub in APAC. I am based in Sydney, Australia. I have been with GitHub for over 5 years, and I've got more than 14 years of experience. That sounds like I'm very old, but here we go. And all of that is around technology. And I had lots of different roles within the software development lifecycle. I've done software developer, mobile development, I've done technical support, service desk, I've done technical trainer, as well as consultancy. During my time at GitHub, I've had the privilege of working with a very diverse range of customers across APAC. So from SMBs to large enterprises, and from very early adopters to like more advanced and more mature organizations. Okay, before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. So the first one is around Q&A. So if you have any question for our speakers, make sure that you drop them in the Q&A tab. And also today I have the developer advocate, Michelle Mannering. You might know her as well as the Hackathon Queen. She is joining us to keep an eye and help with the Q&A questions. We will make sure that we will cover all of your questions toward the end of our panel. As housekeeping as well, few tips on getting a better viewer experience. The first one is make sure that you join us from your desktop. We recommend using like Chrome, Edge, or Safari. Firefox will work. Make sure that you're using the most recent version. If you have any trouble to see the stream, try refreshing the page. If you are having troubles as well and you are on a VPN, maybe try to disable the VPN and try to refresh the screen and see if that will work, or try to log in by dropping like the event link, the link that you've got from your calendar, but in a incognito window. And if you still have some troubles and you would like some help in troubleshooting these issues with the platform, you can navigate to the Docs tab at the far right to find the help document. Okay, so let's get started. Just one more thing before we start with the chat. I would like to start with a panel just to get an idea where everybody is joining us from today. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can start with the first poll. And the poll, you'll be able to see it at the right-hand side, just to see where you guys are joining us from. So I am based in Sydney, not in Sydney City. I've come in a suburb called Castle Hill, 45 minutes away from the city, and I would like to see everybody from the audience where they're joining us from. I will let you answer the first poll, and in the meantime, we will start by getting a quick introduction from our speakers. So today I am joined by Craig, Michael, and Russell. Thank you so much for joining us. And I would like to take just a short moment to learn more about them. So let's start with Craig Wilson, who is our platform engineer at Iris. Craig, would you like to share a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, thanks, Ben. My name is Craig. Yeah, I worked at Iris as a platform engineer, and that's my current role as a platform engineer. I've actually been at Iris for like 20 plus years, so I've seen a lot of change through the company over the years, and I've been through a lot of different roles. Starting off as a VB6 developer to all the way up to deploying into cloud environments, using Terraform and things like that. RS, some people might not know what RS is. RS, we provide software and online services to a lot of financial industries around like trading and wealth management and lending and superannuation, risk, all that type of stuff. Yeah, I don't know what to say, but yeah. So in my current role as a platform engineer, we actually look after our AWS. We call our foundations for the whole company. We like to give the rest, like all our developers, a good footprint to start off with, so they don't have to repeat the same things over and over again, to make sure they're doing the right thing consistently. We also look after a lot of CI/CD tooling and source control and artifact management and other cross concerns across the company. So services that all the developers that actually need. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Craig. And I will pass it to Michael, who is the head of technology platform at Domain. Michael, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Hey, Fatin. Afternoon, everybody. My answer to the poll, just quickly, I'm coming to you from North Sydney, Camaragal country, and acknowledge the traditional custodians of Camaragal country here in North Sydney. So for me, I'm head of technology platforms for Domain, and that means I run, quite similar to Craig, all the source control, all the CI/CD. So Domain Group is, 160 software developers. We're a, $350 million company. And the most famous thing that we, produce is domain.com.au. So a lot of people would have seen that on the side of the bus if you're in Sydney. And that's a property portal. We also sell services to the real estate industry, to banks and to government. So that's what we're about. So my role, covers source control, platforms, and developer experience. So I might hand back to you, Fatin, or over to Russell, maybe.
Yeah, over to you, Russell. So we've got Russell Clarke from the engineering chapter lead at ANZ. I'll pass it to you, Russell.
Thanks, Fatin. Yes, I'm Russell Clarke. I'm the chapter lead and product owner for a platforms team within a team called ANZX. ANZX produces a product called ANZ Plus. It's an Android and iOS app, which is our ANZ's next generation banking platform. So the app where you can download it, you can take a selfie, scan your driver's license, create an account in minutes, and then you can set up savings goals, different buckets. You can track your spend and a lot more features. So it's a new app, new way of banking, and the way the mandate we've been given is to produce everything cloud first, SaaS first, and GitHub is a big part of what we do. So my team, we manage the CI/CD tools. GitHub's part of that. There's also some security tooling, feature flags, other things. So we kind of manage all the tools, support it, and try and abstract it to make the developer's life easy, so they don't have to worry about the underlying tools. They can just focus on what they need to do.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thanks a lot for joining us today in this fireside chat. I would like to share the results from the poll. I'll make sure that we close the poll now and share the results. Can you see the result of the poll on my screen? Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you. So I just want to say, of course, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. But so far, it seems that most of our audience are from APAC, and the highest one is from India. as well as Southeast Asia and Australia, New Zealand. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for dialing in and listening to us. Okay, so I'm not gonna overdo it with the pause, but I still would like to have another question that will help us start the conversation for this fireside chat. And I would like to start, I'll stop sharing and the result of the first poll and ask the audience as well, as how many tools are you using today as part of your software development tooling? So how many tools are is your team using today? So while you are answering this poll, the second poll is open right now. Yeah. While you're answering the second poll, I would like to now ask a question to our audience, to our speakers, sorry. So the first question to Russell, can you walk us a little bit through how you are currently using GitHub at ANZ and why you've got it set up that way?
Yeah, sure. So we in ANZX, we use GitHub, so primarily for source code management, the core feature. We also use it for CI through GitHub Actions. We're in a transition, so we're using CD for using it for some CD, and some other features such as Dependabot to keep our dependencies up to date. We have a lot of config as code, infrastructure as code, so it's kind of the central tool that we use at ANZX to drive all our workflows. So it's really the way we all collaborate, I suppose. We have several hundred engineers, 600 or so engineers, which is quite a high engineering ratio for a banking team. So by kind of integrating everything with GitHub, we can kind of shift left, as we like to say. Testing, building. Through GitHub Actions, we can have checks on pull requests, doing things like linting or running automated tests in our CI. So it really is the central tool that all our other tools integrate with. That's pretty much how we see it.
Nice. So GitHub is like your main platform, and you might have other tools that you're using, as well as you're using like GitHub for CI sometimes, for security and other things as well.
Yeah, so when GitHub doesn't do everything, there's a lot of other tools we use as well. Yeah. And for those tools, what we look at, one of the primary things we look at is how does it integrate with GitHub? Because that's the developer experience, right? That's the primary interface that engineers use, is to interact with Git, either through CLI, VS Code, extensions, whatever. But they all end up going through GitHub when you commit. So how do these tools, security scanning tools, feature flags, etc. How can we integrate it with GitHub and get that fast feedback before we push out a build and before we deploy to production?
Yes, thanks for sharing. Can I ask the same question, Michael? Can you guide us a little bit how you're using GitHub at Domain?
Yeah, I think quite similar to Russell in that obviously we started with GitHub primarily as source control, SCM, as many do. I think probably maybe slightly different. So we're using Actions as a secondary or tertiary build system. So we're a little bit newer to Actions. So we had some CI/CD, fairly well set up CI/CD already, and so Actions, when that arrived, we've moved some workloads there that make sense, but it's not our primary CI/CD. In terms of other components of GitHub we're using, we're certainly using packages quite a lot. So packages is pretty much our go-to for artifact management. It doesn't do everything, to Russell's point. So there's some artifact styles that we can't put there. I think the just kind of picking up on Russell's point a little bit. Because we do have a fairly diverse ecosystem of tools, one of the important things for us also is, can we hook it into GitHub? So, can we do something with the PR, which triggers some other downstream tool? What do those enterprise management features look like? And can it hook into the next downstream piece? And for us, when we look at GitHub, the answer is yes to those things. So can it hook into a variety of tools? Yes. Does it provide us some level of enterprise oversight? Yes. And is the platform expanding to cover new work types as they become available? And the answer is yes. So where we started obviously with the simple use case, we've started pushing into actions and package management and enterprise management because it hooks in really well to such a wide variety of tools. So that's kind of our use case. I'm not sure whether you wanted to pass the same question to Craig or back to you.
Yes, please, Craig. Can you share with us a bit more about Iris usage of GitHub?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's about 5 years ago we started this journey. We had like everything, behind the great corporate firewall, and but developers wanted a little bit more freedom, and we also wanted to integrate and use a lot of other tools. But some of those tools, the internet facing, they're SaaS facing, and then we also started realizing that some of these things we're managing on-prem and managing upgrading them and managing the hardware, we just don't have time to do all this. It's just annoying. Like, we've got other things more important to do. So we started on a journey where we made our issue tracker system sort of a little bit more exposed to the internet, but securely, but exposed so we can use it. And then we decided, well, can we do the same thing with source control? We had source control internally, and so then we went on this discovery. It's like, how would this work, and how would this happen? How would we be comfortable with this? Is it going to be secure enough? And so we ended up landing on using GitHub Enterprise Cloud. I mean, at the time there's only the two options. You either do GitHub on-prem, install it yourself, or use the cloud one. We didn't want to manage it, so go for the cloud one. And so we set it up, and over like I think about a month or something, we got everyone to just move all their repositories across and just continue working. And I think that's one of the good things about Git sometimes, because Git is like just git pull, git push, and off you keep going to some extent. So we've made sure there's a lot of guardrails in there. It's all backed by SSO or off Okta and things like that. So you can't get in there without being properly authenticated. We also be a little bit more strict in terms we enforce every GitHub user who is attached to the org to have their 2FA enabled on their GitHub account, just to be extra secure. It's probably a little bit overkill, but it just gives us a little bit more of an assurance. But we also went to GitHub because, like Michael and Russell was saying, that, when using these tools, these other tools, they usually integrate with GitHub quite early, and so being able to be on that platform makes that life a lot easier. And also the fact that you can integrate things a lot easier too, just out of the box. Because we have it's like currently we're at 900 plus devs within GitHub contributing all the time. There's like 5,000 plus repositories, and all our repositories are under one organization, which is we kind of separate things between. We've got an organization which we consider everything in here has to be private. That's our own private one, and it's the repository where all the main work goes. That's like production work. Then we have another organization that actually has we call like a sandbox one. Developers can go in there and create stuff. We don't care. That's just for them to play around with. But we just try and keep them separate, because otherwise we just end up with a complete mess in the one. And then we have our public-facing org, which is the public-facing repositories, just to keep things separate. I know we could probably put it all in one, but it just makes it very clear to the developers. That's the way it works. When we first joined GitHub, there was no actions, there was no packages, there was no advanced security and that stuff. So we had to use other tools. So we use another tool for CI/CD primarily, and at the moment we're quite ingrained with that because we've set up in a very secure way. But we have talked about numerous times about what could we leverage GitHub Actions for numerous things. And there is always that possibility, and teams do use it for doing certain things. Like at the moment, it's great for them to just use it just to orchestrate things within GitHub. If someone opens a PR, write an action to go do something, against that. It doesn't make sense to go boot up our CI/CD system to go and do that. It's just like, you know, like taking a gorilla to to the workload. And we do depend on Dependabot. That's been great. Teams have integrated that a lot, and that's been great too, because we've been able to integrate that to our artifact system, because that was also something we had existing, and we've managed to integrate to that so they can get updates for the artifacts that we create, in addition to the public ones. And Advanced Security, we have played around a little bit. We're still trying to get there in terms of getting on board with that. But they're all things, I think, they're all the great features of getting everything working all right. And I recommend anyone who's like starting out, just use the features that are there. Don't only start looking a bit further than that if they don't quite fit your use case. But
very, very good point. And the common thing from the three answer is like GitHub is the base, making sure that whatever you're using can integrate, as well as exploring the existing features and tools that you have available within GitHub at the moment as well. As you said, it started as a place to store your code, but now it's evolved way more. It's got GitHub Advanced Security. You've got like GitHub Actions for automation, for CI packages, the project management tool, GitHub Project, as well as like Codespaces and Copilot. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but let's close the poll. Thank you everyone for answering the poll. I will close it and share the answers to the second poll, which is around the number of tools. Can you see the poll results? Yeah. So as you can see, we've got the highest one is 1 to 5, and then followed like, which is I think very acceptable as well as realistic, because as we all know that consolidating tools is like one of the things that is everybody's goal. But in reality, when it comes to real life and to practice, some of the teams might be in the process of working toward that goal. So it might be that they're still working on consolidating as much tools as possible, but sometimes it can be like, you know, via an acquisition that they inherited some different tools and different teams that they have to work with, or some other requirements that they want to use. The main thing is to make sure that these tools can integrate with each other, like having GitHub as your base, and make sure that if there are things that you can use from GitHub, do that, because it will make your life easier. It's all embedded within one platform. You don't have to go somewhere else, and that will take us back to the developer experience, as the developers do not want to have to switch context all the time. They prefer to be in one single place, and this is the place where they want to be working, where they want to be focused on. And for like having GitHub Advanced Security, for example, as part of the software development lifecycle will make it easier for the developer to go and fix these issues. But in the scenarios where we have to adopt and take other tools, make sure that they can integrate with each other, they can talk with each other. Thank you all for answering this poll. And any comment from the speakers on the poll results? Is that something that you were expecting, or like was it like a bit of a shock?
30 plus is interesting, but then again, we do have a lot of I think excess tools that we need to consolidate, and that has also come from mainly from acquisitions, and then you know, trying to get around to moving them into another platform. Sometimes it's difficult because sometimes they're under the pump and pressure and they don't have time to do it. And but the more you have, the worse it gets, because I've had situations where everyone, like say for example, we've got one artifact system, but we've got all these CI/CD tools, and they all need to integrate with it. They all need credentials, and when we need to rotate them, we've got to run through all these tools to fix it up, and it's just a real pain. Like
the one thing I'd guess is I'm not imagining any individual developers interacting with 30 tools. I think there was about 5 people who said 30 tools. My guess is Russell, Craig, and I probably do have more than 30 tools under our remits. I think there might be 5 other, head of platform type people on that poll, and I would say that they're likely to be the ones who are in that 30 plus. I would hope no individual developers having to, in their day or week interact with 30 tools. That is a lot. Even in a large company, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And I think we're a greenfields project, so we've started with a few, but we are expanding. But the broader ANZ, there's definitely will be people in the 30+ category. So yeah, Craig, I was also a bit like, whoa, that's that's a lot. And then I was thinking, yeah, what do people think when they answer this question? I can see there as, yeah, if you start looking into it, I can probably at least count 15. So it's, yeah, as time goes on, you get spread, and then you got to do that consolidation exercise every few years.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to open one more poll so that way we can keep the conversation going. And this one is around the CI/CD tools that you are using regularly. So we have GitHub Actions as part of GitHub. And with GitHub Enterprise, like, you get 50,000 minutes available for you to use GitHub Actions. And we've got other tools. I just wanted to see what are the tools that the audience are using. So I just opened the poll right now. So if you can please give us your answers in the poll tab. And in the meantime, I just want to ask Russell, please. So I know that you come from a banking industry, from a very regulated industry. I just want to see, how were you able to enable your team to use like GitHub Enterprise Cloud and like as a SaaS offering?
Yeah, that's good, because when I joined ANZ, we were not using the cloud at all. We were not using SaaS products, and that was only a few years ago. And we've really done kind of 180 degrees in the past few years, where if you're not doing things on cloud, then it's kind of question why we're using a SaaS product or something. And it's interesting how that's changed. So I think Craig mentioned some of the things that Iris uses. So things like, you also use Enterprise Cloud, which is essentially the GitHub.com, but there's an enterprise layer which lets you put some management over your organizations. So we also enforce SSO and 2FA on all our accounts, kind of like a basic thing we can do to just lock down access to the orgs. But even that's not enough. It's kind of, there's a lot of features of GitHub. We wanted people to use GitHub Actions, and that was one of our primary reasons for using Enterprise Cloud. Back when we started, Actions was not available for GitHub Enterprise. So like, this was there's analysis done. This was the only option that really worked. So like, how can we secure Enterprise Cloud? So with GitHub Actions, by default, you run your workflows on GitHub, provides the runners, they call GitHub hosted runners. So the workflows run on Google's backend cloud to run the workflows. But they're essentially public internet facing, which is something we don't want. So GitHub provides the self-hosted runners option. So you basically spin up your own runners, and we primarily use Google Cloud. So we've got the Google Cloud VMs that we register with GitHub, and they run our workloads. So that's one of the things we do. And then those VMs are behind our firewall, and they have to proxy out the internet stuff, so we can control egress and make sure we don't we're going to control traffic to those VMs. We've built a lot of config as code. So one is just helps maintenance. We don't need to maintain things through ClickOps, especially when we've got a team of like 600 developers. So we've done a lot of config as code. We've built some wrappers which encapsulate the APIs. So things like repo management, user management teams are all done through code. And then because of that, we can actually limit access to some of the features. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. If there's a new feature available, then I don't know, repo environments or something, then we need to update our code to support that. but at the same time, it lets us control what features the team uses. So it's kind of a constant back and forth. We get our engineers. I get requests every week. People saying, "Oh, I've heard about this new GitHub feature," or and they'll say, "Can we use it?" And I have to say, "Well, yes, but please wait," because we need to do an assessment first, right? We need to make sure that we can do it in a safe way. And sometimes it's an easy decision. Other times it requires a bit more thought.
One of the ones that we've just picked up on, Russell, you talked about runners just before. So we use the default runners that come with GitHub, the 50,000 minutes for some workloads. We actually had a restriction just recently where we needed our runner to talk on a fixed IP, essentially through to another platform, Snowflake in this case, and we didn't want it to have a moving IP. And there is actually a feature, I'm not sure if the audience know, it's in beta at the moment, called large runners. And one of the advantages of large runners is you can actually get a fixed IP out of the large runner. And so then you can provide that to the downstream service as knowing that it comes from that location. And that's sort of halfway in between those, private runners and the default runners where things are moving around. So I'm not sure whether people get links off the back of this, but there's a page where you can go and register for the beta, and that's served us well. That's only been in our account for a couple of weeks. So that was sort of halfway in between those two worlds of private runners and the public ones that come with your account.
Thanks for sharing. And that's the idea behind the larger runner, to make it a bit easier for people who have like these IP addresses and security restrictions.
Also builds twice, which is nice.
Yes. Let me share the results from the poll. So the poll that we had around what are the CI/CD tools that our audience are using, and I can see we've got 47% using GitHub Actions. I'm very happy with that results. I know that we've got people still using other CI tools, and as our speakers mentioned, GitHub Actions was not started when GitHub started. So lots of people started adopting GitHub, and they were still using Jenkins, Circle CI, other CI tools. But the good news here as well is that first of all, you've got the 50,000 minutes that are available for you as part of your GitHub Enterprise to help you start using GitHub Actions, as well as we've got what we call GitHub Actions Importer to help you migrate from your existing CI tools to GitHub Actions. Thank you all for sharing with us your results. And I just want to switch gears. Let me stop sharing maybe first. And I just want to... Yeah. Yes.
I'm just interested. Jenkins is still up there.
Yeah, I know.
And there's so many good options nowadays. Yeah.
So
Jenkins is still there. Yeah.
So for the audience, Domain still is a large Jenkins user, and when I mentioned that to Russell and Craig, they were very surprised at how ingrained Jenkins was to our pipeline. So I think to your previous question, Fatan, how surprised are people? I think Craig's probably pretty surprised at the high up Jenkins is in people's current workloads.
Yeah, it might be people delaying about migration.
Yeah, that's what I was going to. I think that's the thing. No one likes doing a migration, right? And, Jenkins is a tool. Once you've got it and you set it up, and it does its job, it works. And sure, I would agree. Actions is a better tool, but biting the bullet and doing that migration is not always an easy ask, right?
Yeah.
No, not always, but yeah. We've had an experience recently where we had internal team that was still using Bamboo, and I was convincing him just move to, because we use Buildkite, just move to Buildkite, and they're like, oh, it's going to be too hard. This is not going to work. This is not going to work. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? And it's like, I just talk them through it, and then eventually they started it, and they said, oh, actually, this is not too bad. I can actually get all this stuff across and get it building, get it running. And the same apply if it was for Actions, where you just sometimes it may seem a big task, but you can sometimes get through it quite easily. But I think it's also how you use the tool. I think we're sort of going down this path where we're trying to say, don't try and use too many features of the tool, because you want to get your thing to run locally. That's your first thing. If you can run it locally, you can get running in any CI/CD system technically, and that's to us is like the goal.
Thank you for sharing. I'm just gonna switch gears a little bit now and talk about new hire onboarding experience. We'll hear from our audience via the poll as well. So I will open another poll to get an idea about how long does it take for a new hire on your team to start committing code, to start being productive and doing real work, as well as at the same time, I would like to hear from our speakers about the hiring, the onboarding experience within your company. Would you like to start, Craig?
Sure. I think as long as stars are aligned and the new hire is being added to the right groups in the first day, the first time, although if they weren't, we can actually get them added that day. They would get pretty much straight access into GitHub. They would just have to then just connect up either their own GitHub account, or they can create their own. We know some users decide to create their own separate one because they want to keep a separation between their work and their home life. But generally, yeah, they'll get access. They get straight into the org. They can they assign the SSH key. They can then authorize it to bypass the SSO, so they can start cloning, and they can pull something, and they can open a pull request and compute pretty much on the same day. So it can be pretty fast. I mean, we're also, when we're trying to at ICE, when we onboard people now, we try and make sure there's a bit of work for them to actually even start with within the first day, or at least the first week, so they can actually contribute. Because if the faster you get someone to contribute, then the faster they feel a part of the team, part of the company, and feel productive. They're doing something productive.
Yeah, I think we're on a bit of a journey with this. So we're Okta users as well, but our sort of code owners and team ownership files don't sort of map neatly into the org structure as it currently stands. So I think the capability is all there. We haven't fully strung that together yet in terms of taking a person's name and their start date, attaching the GitHub handle to it, because we find that out generally on day one rather than ahead of time. And we allow people to port in their GitHub handle. We found with developers coming into our environment, that was something that they wanted and something that we wanted to enable. So we have probably a less restrictive environment, I suppose, than some of the banking environments. We don't force people to create a new GitHub handle specifically for the org. And we're just working on that sort of automation all the way through. So the onboarding from the first day through to Okta and then down to the team, that's not there yet. It's something that we're working on. The capability exists in all of the pieces. We just need those sort of team and groups set up properly in GitHub, essentially by the team, and then we can map that all the way through. We also target around that first day, getting somebody up and operational. So that's everything from, we issue laptops, and that's all one-click provisioning. So from signing into your laptop all the way through to getting some code committed. We target a day, but I don't think everybody makes a day. And I'll be completely honest, we don't actually measure it and check up on people either. So it's probably a target for us to actually circle back and check how well we're doing on that sort of target.
And how does it look like at the ANZ Bank?
Yeah, so for us, so I mentioned we have a lot of config as code. So onboarding, a lot of it is a matter of adding users to the right groups and raising a pull request. So we kind of need to bootstrap that for them, and we're actually working on a project right now to simplify onboarding. Once they have that, though, that usually takes less than half a day or so. Then they are provisioned, and it depends on the team, but within platform, we give everyone an onboarding exercise. That's essentially a kind of a hello world exercise, but the main point is to make sure they do have access and they can use all the tools, have Docker set up and everything. So usually the onboarding exercise, people complete it within a couple of days. And then after that, then providing we have work available, then they can start committing. They've already proved they can commit through the through the onboarding exercise. So I mean, we had a new starter last week, and Monday he gave his first pull request, and so that's right on track.
Nice. I would like to share, first of all, close the poll and share the results to see what does it look like for our audience. We've got 63% a week, and one day we've got only 17%. I think for the 1 month and larger data months, I think there's lots of room for improvement here to reduce that, because we are talking about developer experience, and the onboarding is like the new hire or the developer's first experience. I think we can help remove lots of these friction via, like when it comes to their entitlement, to via SSO, as well as like via other tools. Like we've got Codespaces, we've got Copilot, and there's a great blog post on GitHub blog post that talks about how the GitHub engineering team moved to Codespaces and how they were able to get up and running, as well as like for a new hire to be able to start committing code and working and being able to get their environment set up, not having to get like their machines and all of that, helping with that, all of that, and getting them to deploy code to the deployment like around 10 seconds, which is amazing. And having someone to be productive, as the sooner they join, the better, of course. Are you guys surprised with the results, or like 1 week is kind of realistic in your opinion?
I think if you,
okay.
I was going to say, if you're going up to a week, I mean, if it's within a week, I think you're doing okay. Try and get to that day or two is kind of the goal. The month and longer than a month, I'd be curious about why that is. Like, is there because there's any training involved before they start? Is that the reason why, or other complexities? Or are there other things outside of just GitHub? Maybe just getting a laptop or getting a PC, or other things to that developer.
I wonder whether there's some system knowledge uplift that's required as well. So some highly regulated industries maybe, or some certain segments, you might need to go through some very structured onboarding before you're actually even allowed to look or touch the code. So I'm imagining security or defense or some of these types of things. Maybe there's some security people, but I think the opportunity in that 1 week space, if you can reduce that 1 week space, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity there. Really thinking about the onboarding and what are the holdups. There's definitely possibilities. So we don't use Codespaces as an example. We issue pretty powerful laptops to all our developers. But to be honest, it's something we should probably experiment with to get people on quicker while they're setting up the more structured environment. So there's certainly knowledge and learning that you can do to explore the code and understand the code through something like Codespaces before you might want to compile locally, as an example. So it might be something that we should look at actually as well. So
it's something we've thought about Codespaces and other things before, because it means you're providing these expensive, more powerful laptops, and sometimes each developer's got varying degrees of what they actually really need. And so if you offload that to a Codespace, it means you can give them a simpler, lighter device to carry around, and they've got all the power they can get in the cloud, and makes their experience a lot easier.
And remembering, I do the IT side as well. So remembering that for a lot of us, the normalizing means you're actually on the highest common denominator. So you're going to buy, $3,500 laptops to try and get them to last, 2-3 years. That's fairly expensive when you're talking. I mean, both you, Russell, and Craig have way more developers than I do, but that gets quite expensive when you start.
It adds up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
One other thing about Codespaces, I mean, we're not using it either, but we're also interested in the kind of the security aspects of that, like knowing what you've got, having a lockdown environment. Of course, we've got all the protections on the laptop, but we still have to, have to enable
Yeah.
engineers to download packages and things, right? And somewhat puts trust engineers are not going to, I don't know, be accidentally or just download things that may cause problems.
How many developers?
Yeah, again,
how many developers you got on exclude lists though? Because the local compilation's tripping up your XDR, right? So.
Yeah, because we've been going through trying to align with the Essential 8, and one of the pillars is to be non-admins on anywhere. So, as an non-admin on a laptop for a developer, it can make life extremely difficult if certain things aren't in place to help out with that. So, maybe the solution to that is Codespaces, where you can go on your local laptop. You're not an admin, but you don't have many tools, but you go into this environment where it's somewhere safe and you've got a little bit more flexibility about what you can do in there.
Yeah, we're adding lots of policies as well for Codespaces to make it even like safer and more secure place than having anything on the developer machines, because that will be even better and safer. Okay, I have a question for Craig. You mentioned previously that you had to go through a migration exercise to GitHub Enterprise Cloud and start your SaaS journey, and that coming from on-prem. Can you tell us a little bit more about that migration?
Yes, I mean we're using an on-prem, like we're using Bitbucket server, I'll say it, but we're using on-prem and everyone was in there and everyone was coming on great, but then we wanted to open it up, so it's like, well, how are we going to move all these repositories into GitHub? And then we had a looming deadline coming because our license was starting to run out and we didn't want to renew it, so it's like, how are we going to do this? So I mean, unfortunately, I took a bit of a sledgehammer approach to it. I think there was some tooling available to help with the migration from GitHub, but it would mean I think we had to go for the extra services, the external services to help out with that, because the tooling wasn't available to us directly, which has changed now. Everyone can there's open source tooling for that. Yeah, everyone can download and migrate however they want. So it makes it, which we have used for another use case. It does work really well. But yeah, pretty much we had a space of like, I think a month, and then at the end of the day, we just simply turned around and said, that's it. Okay, everyone, you've got a month to move your repositories across. So a lot of them just git push, git pull, git push. You have to leave all your PRs behind. We can't bring them across. It's too difficult to try and get that, query that stuff out of Bitbucket and get it into GitHub and align it all. And so for a lot of teams, they complained about it. I mean, it was one of the best. We probably could have scripted a bit better, but we were running out of time. But they managed to get it over the line. And pretty much, it went into read-only mode anyway. So if you've missed the deadline, as long as you could still get your stuff, you can still get stuff out. You just could no longer work with that environment. But it's interesting because a lot of it, like I hear a lot, but I've done this before where we try to move stuff and like, oh, we want to bring all our history with us, and we want to bring all this with us, we want to bring all that with us. It's like, yeah, but how often do you need to go back that far? And then, and this kind of proved that we left all these pull requests behind and they still kept going. Like it wasn't too big of a deal. But I think if you did, you'd probably just try and pull that stuff across as much as possible.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, if you go to /features/preview, on GitHub, I think there might be now a GitHub supported beta for Bitbucket to GitHub. There is,
and we just
including PRs and all that.
Yeah, right. Because we've still actually got Bitbucket server running in a read-only mode because it's unlicensed, and we've been sort of just ignoring it for a bit, and it's come to this year. It's like this, we have to turn it off. So got to go in there, delete as much things that don't need to be in there anymore, and then copy and archive to GitHub the rest of it so that we don't lose anything. Because I know there's some stuff there people have forgotten that they actually need, that just didn't need to touch. So yeah, we're going to go through that.
Yeah, when you started the migration things, it wasn't available, but later on it was. So that's why you had to go through all of that.
Yeah, there's also mapping, I suppose, because you had like in Bitbucket, it's projects and then repositories, but in GitHub, it's just repositories. So it's like if we brought them across, that we end up with name collisions and things like that. So we let it up to the teams to bring them across, and we want them also to fix their repository names because they're all over the place. Trying to get some sort of consistency naming convention. But everyone also,
everyone had a tools project in there. Everyone had a tools project or a foundation project or something.
Yeah, exactly. Migration time is always good time for cleanup. properly before doing it.
The other thing to watch out for is the size of repository. We had issues with some teams had large files checked in, and we managed to get them in there in Bitbucket, but we could not push it into GitHub, and they had to rewrite history to get rid of it, and that was a bit of a pain point. Yeah, it's what you have to do.
Yeah, you'd be with LFS. That would be. Thanks for sharing. I can tell that the migration journey is way better because the time that the Iris had it was at early stage. But now we've got services, we've got partners, with our own professional services team would be happy to help. We've got our partners as well as tools in place. And question for Michael. I know that you talked about domain having lots of different acquisitions. I just want to see how did that go with all the integrating different platforms together, and any challenges that you had faced at that time as well?
Yeah, look, we're still going through that. So Domain acquired a large company called Realbase, less than 12 months ago. We have to go on a journey with the Bitbucket migration. So I might take some tips from Craig or use that, Peter. I think the primary thing is whenever there's an acquisition and it's coming into the organization, you have to look at what tools you currently have. What the setup is in the other company, and make a call in a lot of cases. To Craig's point, do you leave some of that behind? Is there stuff you actually want to migrate? I think what's important in the domain context isn't necessarily important in other contexts, and vice versa. One of the most important things, though, for us is especially if the acquired company has software developers, they're all coming in and seeing the domain group software pretty much straight away, from fairly early on. Those developers can come in and see the catalog of services. Domain's been around more than 20 years, and we've got a lot of internal services that do interesting things with property data or, interesting services. So I think what do? You catalog, you have a look, you set up migration programs. Is there challenges? Yes, but a lot of them are overcome because most, small, medium companies have one of some of the major tools. We've not done a lot where the acquired company has been in GitHub, which is interesting, just as of note. But yeah, that's how we sort of approach it. We have a look, we catalog it out as and when. I think a few people here have mentioned in passing contracts coming up to end dates, and that, I think that's always a good trigger because nobody likes to pay for two tools at once. And then once the source control is over, we've spoken a little bit today about that concept that it's then possible to take GitHub-based source code and hook it back into the existing CI or CD of the company. And so you don't actually have to migrate the entire tool set from a company into the center. You can actually start with the source code, bring it into GitHub, and then still back connect to the other company's package management or CI/CD or whatever it might be. So I know we're sort of close to time, so I'll just pause my answer.
Thanks for sharing. I know I have lots of other questions for our speakers, but because we are nearing the end of the session, and I would like to give opportunity for the audience to ask you questions as well. So I would like to ask Mish if she can join us on stage, please. Hi, Mish.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you so much for looking after the Q&A, and I can see that it's very busy.
Okay.
So
yes,
I'll pass
very
it
busy.
to you
So
for the
I know
questions.
we're running low on time. We've probably only got time for a couple of questions. So I'll just kick straight off then, if that's all right. So I've had a few questions in the chat about GitHub Actions and some fantastic conversations about GitHub Actions. But a lot of us know that GitHub Actions is one of the sort of younger or newer CI/CD platforms. And so the question that the audience is asking is, why have each of you individually gone for GitHub Actions over maybe some of the other CI/CD platforms?
Well, yeah. So for us, it was at the time it's a tool that a lot of our engineers already use for their personal projects. So it's a lot of engineers use they still, they like doing their personal projects in their spare time. They store their code on their personal GitHub repositories, and then just take advantage of GitHub Actions for the CI as it's built in. So a lot of the engineers enjoyed that experience, and so we thought, well, how can we give them the same experience at work? It's it's you're going to get happier engineers, right? They're using a tool that they enjoy using, that they're familiar with. Faster onboarding, as we're talking about.
Yeah.
So that was the primary driver for that. A lot of these other tools we mentioned are not really used, except in corporate environments. So there's a bit of upskilling if we use one of those other tools.
I'll jump in. So 50,000 free minutes helps, right? So you're always looking at cost. That's free compute. So that's one. And the second one is we tend to use it in some sort of secondary things that don't necessarily have a codified pipeline. So if you're building a standard node app out to a container, we've got a pipeline that's well established that does that. Maybe you're building something that's a little bit new. You're connecting to a new ETL tool in the data world or something like that. It's not really a CI/CD in a traditional sense. You're sort of more scripting in the cloud. So you're taking some of the code that you've got, and it is absolutely code, but you might not necessarily be punching out a container or an artifact. And so that's some of the use cases we've seen quite successfully with Actions.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when we first come across GitHub, there wasn't any GitHub Actions, so we've centered on another tool for this time being. But we keep looking at GitHub Actions, and we keep thinking, for some cases, it's better to keep it in GitHub. That's where we want to stay. Like you said, there's no point going out to fire up a CI/CD for us running a simple script when they could just run it as a quick action and get a result. Especially if it's like for a check or something, for a PR check or something, that would come in handy. So that's where we're using it more predominantly. But I think over time we may look at it and use it a bit more extensively.
Fantastic. Thank you for those answers. Now, we've probably got time for one more question, but we know, if you've seen in the news and the media, one of the big hot topics right now is AI and artificial intelligence. We've had quite a few questions in the chat about this, but I've kind of distilled it down to one question right now, which is how do each of you see AI being implemented into your workflows, and what kinds of things how do you think the jobs will change for not just your workflows but your developers as well? Maybe thinking GitHub Copilot, but not necessarily.
We're thinking GitHub Copilot.
Okay.
There's a lot of interest in our team on GitHub Copilot, like all around, management, engineers, everyone's excited. So that's one of the things we're looking at. How do we enable people to use GitHub Copilot, but conscious that it's a pretty dramatic shift in engineering, right? So we're going to do our assessment, but we're starting a trial. Essentially, it's just a way to make engineers more efficient. That's the way I see it, and especially replacing some of the more maybe the mundane things that you have to do, but it's just going to take it might take you a few hours, but if you can do it in a few minutes, then that's a big advantage. And we've all seen the announcement, Copilot X, debug my code, test my code, comment my code, whatever, right? So, that's pretty exciting as well.
Yeah, I've got kind of three quick things. I think we're in starting a trial for Copilot as well. In enterprise environments, things tend to be that little bit slower than your side projects. So we definitely see that as a developer enhancement. ChatGPT's everywhere, right? Plugins were released on Friday. I think there will be some security pullback on that, I think, at some point. So we're all of us work for corporates. So be very careful about uploading your corporate data into ChatGPT, because there will be exploits that come in there. And the balance will be somewhere in between. And then I think, purely from a software development point of view, all those fundamentals are still required, right? If people are worried about software jobs going away because ChatGPT can, write boilerplate or Copilot can write boilerplate, you don't need to worry. There's plenty of jobs of making sure that what it's writing is good, and all those key concepts kind of will remain forever around, time complexity trade-offs and all those kind of things. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. If it makes your job faster and more efficient, that'd be the thing I'd be concentrating on with sort of AI. Craig, I don't know how you guys are going.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to look at it and then we couldn't because it wasn't available for business yet. And now that it is, then we're going to, again, same thing, start a trial at some point, I believe. But with someone asked a question internally recently and ended up, like a popcorn, watching this chat going off, people having a go at each other and around questions around redundant jobs and this and that. But I kind of see it as, it's to me, it feels like I've used ChatGPT. Like my example is I was writing a blog post and I wrote it all myself and I was publishing it internally. And I thought, oh, hang on, I'll just ask ChatGPT to do the same thing. I'll just tell it what I needed and just ask for this blog post. And it just spewed it out in like 2 seconds. But every time I ask the same question, it always give me a completely different blog post. So the idea is it's not giving an answer, it's giving that answer, it's giving some answer, and you can use that as a basis to get started. And I think the same thing happens with this. You're getting some example of code, but you don't have to use it. And as long as it's coming from the public domain, like to me, it's no different than searching Stack Overflow and other things and trying to find a solution.
I'm looking forward to seeing how you're. I'm really looking forward to seeing how you're all using AI in future. But that's all we have time for today for our questions. Thank you all so much for answers. I'll hand it back to Faten to wrap us up. Thanks, Faten.
Thank you so much, Mish. And our CEO shared earlier in the keynote as well how Copilot is here to help developers. We're talking about developer experience. It's not taking anyone's jobs here. It's the opposite. It's making them be able to deliver code faster. And another one that I thought was very interesting is that developers are reporting there to be like 75% more fulfilled when using Copilot because, they know what they're doing. They are the drivers, not the Copilots. I'm just going to share my screen. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I really enjoyed the conversation. I really hope our audience also enjoyed it. I just wanted to say big thank you to Craig, Michael, and Russell for joining us today, and give a quick summary of the schedule of events for the next couple of days. So for today, make sure that we've got stick around because we've got another interactive forum later on, followed the same theme, which is like productivity, where my colleague Anthony Borton and Damian Brady will have a full session planned where they will showcase how quickly a new developer can get committing with Codespaces, Code Search, Code View, as well as Copilot. We talked a little bit about Codespaces today, but if you want to hear more about it, join Anthony and Damian later today. On Thursdays, it's more around security, where we are hosting the head of security engineering at Flipkart and the CISO from Razorpay on our fireside chat panel, followed by a very interactive forum as well, discussing the changing of role of security in the DevSecOps. Finally, on Friday, we have another great fireside chat planned featuring team leadings from CBA, from Commonwealth Bank, from KPMG Tokyo, as well as UDAN, as well as running a very fun interactive session where my colleagues Kartik and Shilpa will be talking through some of the common developer myths, as well as how they could be holding you back. So all of these sessions, including the keynotes, everything will be broadcasted and everything will be available on demand. So you will be receiving a follow-up email once the sessions are available to view it. So make sure you check your inbox. And if you would like a deeper dive on anything that we covered today, and that can be anything from GitHub Enterprise, Copilot, Codespaces, anything that you would like, GitHub Advanced Security that you would like to learn more about, you can click the book meeting button on the top right of your corner, and we will make sure that we will get in touch with you shortly. And lastly, I just want to say, please take just a minute or two to complete a short survey about your experience with us today. You'll find the link to the survey as well in the Documents tab at the right of your corner of your screen, in the resources or in the chat window. We will be sharing it as well. So we designed this program for you, and we really want to make sure that you are getting the most out of it. And we would like to get your feedback. So please make sure that you share that with us so we can get a better experience always. Don't be shy. Tell us what you think, please. And with that, I just want to say thank you again to our speakers, and thank you to all the audience for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you all. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Michael. And thanks, Russell. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.